Welcome to Excel and Business Math video number 24. Hey, in this video, we got to learn about the amazing COUNTIFS function and use it with the part and base formula we've been studying to calculate probabilities and build a frequency distribution. Now, here's our example. Imagine that you had a data set from a particular teacher or from a particular school with all the past grades. Well, guess what? We can use the COUNTIFS functions to count how many A pluses it found over in here. And when we copy the formula down, we'll actually be able to count exactly how many grades from this past 5 years of data there were. Then guess what? We have the parts, and we can compare them to the whole to get a percentage. Once we do that, we've created a frequency distribution. And get this, once we calculate that a B minus has a 15.3% chance of happening, we just calculated a probability that we can use to estimate in the future. From that number, we can say, hey, from past data, we can estimate that 15.3% of the students will get a B minus. Now, we want to start off by going over to the sheet probability. Now, probability, what is probability? Well, probability is not hard. It sounds fancy. We have all used probability and words related to probability throughout all of our life. Probability, these are all the synonyms. Probability, chance, likelihood, probable, and probably. Anytime you say, I probably will come to the party, if you could assign a number to that, right? Well, maybe it's 15% or 20% chance that I'll come to the party. Then you've done something like a probability. Probability, it's just a chance that something will occur in the unknown future. A fancy way of describing probability, a numerical measure of the likelihood that an event will occur in the future. Now, notice that sounds fancy, but that's exactly what we're going to do. If we count that there are 183 B minuses, once we do the division part to the whole or the total and get 0.153 or formatted as 15.3%, we have created a numerical measure based on past data that we can use to estimate the unknown future. Now, probability is an estimate of an event that may occur in the future. All of these, this is past data. It's our best estimate based on what's happened in the past, but it's only an estimate of the unknown future. Probability is never known with certainty. Probability is only an estimate. And most importantly, probability is always a number between 0 and 1. You cannot have a probability greater than 1, and you cannot have a negative probability. Now, with percentages, increases, decreases, and all the things we've been doing for the last few weeks, you can definitely have percentages and increases greater than 1 and decreases in percentages less than 1. But for probability, since we're estimating the future, the most that anything can ever be in terms of occurring or not occurring is 100%. And we cannot have a negative probability because it doesn't make sense. Minus 10 chance that you'll get an A grade. Now, some examples, always between 0 and 1. Probability that the sun will go out in the next 5 seconds. Well, we don't know what's going to happen in 5 seconds from now, but we're pretty sure, based on all the past data, that's not going to happen. So that's an example of where the probability can be 0. An example of a probability that's 1, probability that it will rain in Seattle next year. Looking at all past data, right, for the last couple of 100 years, well, it's rained every single year. So we're pretty sure the probability is 1 or 100%. Probability that you'll get a 6 when you roll a die, 1 out of 6. There's 6 sides, and only one side has 6. Probability that you'll get a B grade in your English class, 6.4%. Now, where did we get that? We looked at past data. We had a data set, and sure enough, when we counted, we got 77. We compared it to all the students in that class, and we got 6.4%. Probability that the next item purchased as target is food, 0.15. And we'll see an example where we look at a data set from a store and we count how many of the items were food, how many of the items were home related, how many were garden related. And we'll calculate that probability. Notice, just like the past few weeks, fractions, percents, decimals, they're all just different ways of expressing the same thing. Now, frequency distributions. Let's look over here. Really, the word frequency is just the fancy way of saying counting. We're counting all these items. Anytime you have a complete list of all the possibilities and you count from a data set how many of each you found and have a total at the bottom, this is a frequency distribution. Now, the term relative frequency, what does it mean? Well, frequency refers to the count, each one of these parts. Relative means we compare each one of the parts relative to the total. Relative frequency means some decimal or percentage where we do our part divided by base formula to figure out the relative frequency, or the parts out of 100. So for B minus, we would expect, if we were using this as a probability, for every 100 students, 15.3 of them would get a B minus. 6.4 for every 100 would get a B. Now, we got to go over to the sheet COUNTIFS, and we got to talk about the amazing COUNTIFS functions. Now, if I asked you to look at the sales rep column and count how many sales rep are in this column, well, you'd have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 of them. But if I asked you to count how many GGs there are in this column, well, you'd have to not count all of them. You'd have to count just some of them. And the only way that you can count just some of them is knowing what the condition or criteria is. Now, this is really a condition or a criterion, but criteria, the plural word, that's the name for the argument that the COUNTIFS function uses. But you can't count how many GGs are unless you know what the condition or criteria is. Since we know it's GG, then we go through and say, is that equal to GG? False. Is that equal to GG? True. So we count that one. And we go through the entire list, true, false, and when we get to the end, we found 4 GGs. So our count is 4. Now, let's see how to use the COUNTIFS function to count with a single condition. Now, this is a small data set, but in our examples in this video and later in the class, we are going to be so happy that we have COUNTIFS because it'll automatically count for us. We will not have to do it manually. All right, you ready? We start every formula with the equal sign. And if I type count, as we saw earlier in this class, we can look through and notice there's lots of different counting functions. If I arrow down, the blue selected function will always have a screen tip that describes what it does. When I get down to COUNTIFS, counts the number of cells specified by a given set of conditions or criteria. Sounds perfect. Now, COUNTIF is a function that existed in the earlier history of Excel. We don't use that one anymore. We use COUNTIFS, the one with the S. Tab. Now, let's look at our screen tips. Criteria range 1, and then it says criteria 1. Now, remember, manually, you have to know what the condition is, and you have to know where all of the items for counting are. Well, notice this is a range of items, and this is just a single item. So the way I memorize what to put in each argument is I look for the word range. Criteria range. That reminds me, that that's the argument where I highlight a range with all of the potential items for counting. Notice it also has a 1. That's convenient because when I comma, there's criteria 1. But notice another argument pops up. Now, we're not going to use any of these in this video, but you can actually add lots of conditions or criteria for counting. Now, it says criteria 1. It doesn't say range. So that's how I know to select the single condition. And that's it. COUNTIFS automatically knows to take GG and count how many GGs are in that range. Close parentheses and enter. And just like that, I get a count of 4. If I change this, notice Excel's golden rule, all conditions or criteria that can change have to be put into a cell. If I come over here and change this to dawn, Control Enter, immediately I get a count of 2. Because what did COUNTIFS do? It went through and counted just the dawns. Now I'm going to Control Z. Now I want to try a different example as we're learning on a small data set how to use COUNTIFS. 1023. Well, I need to look through this, and manually I just have to count on my fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. But no way. If we had a big data set, we would not want to do that. So let's use COUNTIFS. Use the one with the S. Criteria range 1. The word range reminds me that I have to highlight all of the items, wherever that range is. It doesn't matter what size it is, right? Comma. And then I put my single condition or criteria, 1023 for us. Close parentheses and enter. Now, those are 2 examples of how to use COUNTIFS. Now, let's go use it on a set of grade data. We want to go figure out what the probability is or what the chances are that we're going to get an A in Math 148 class. Now, here's our data set. Let's click in the top, and I want to use the keyboard Control down arrow to see how tall this data set is. So it looks like there's over 1,200 records or rows in this data set. Control up arrow. Notice we have student ID, year and quarter, and then the grade. Now, we're only interested in the grade column. But we want to go through, and for the A pluses and the A's and the A minuses, I need to count how many times each one of these grades occur in this column. Now, manually, there's no way. This would take us forever. But we're lucky. We're in Excel. We can use equals COUNTIFS. Criteria range, that's the word range, so we know that that's the entire column. Now, let's remember our keyboard shortcuts. I click in the top cell, Control-Shift down arrow to highlight all the way down to the bottom of the set. And guess what? That criteria range, that column right there needs to be locked. So I hit the F4 key to lock it. There, I put the dollar signs in. So when I copy down, that range won't work. Now, I can tell you, teaching this class for so many years, one of the most common errors that people make on their tests is they forget to lock it. No problem. When we copy the formula down to the bottom, we'll check it with F2. All right, comma. Criteria 1, A plus. And that's a relative cell reference. All right, you ready? Close parentheses, Control-Enter, and I'm going to click and drag. I'm not going to double-click and send that down. I go to the last cell, and I hit F2. I am checking that that blue range right there is locked. I'm checking that that orange range is not locked. It's looking at the F grade. Sure enough, cell reference is working good. Enter. Alt equals to add them up. I'm verifying that the range is correct, and I hit Enter. There I have created the first part of my frequency distribution. I can clearly see that over the past 5 years for this particular data set, there were 91 B pluses, 73 D minuses. Wow, only 5 A pluses. Now we can calculate our relative frequency or probability using our part divided by base. Equal sign, left arrow, that's the part for A plus, divided by the total down at the bottom, and I'm going to use the F4 key to lock that. Control Enter, and I'm going to copy it down. Come to the last cell, F2. I'm verifying that there's a relative cell reference, the blue one, and the orange one is locked on the total. Now, anytime we have all of the possibilities from our column, and we're comparing each part to the whole, these percentages, probabilities, or relative frequencies will always add up to 1. Alt equals, and Enter. If they didn't add up to 1, it means our formula here is not pointing towards all of the data points, or we don't have all of the categories. But there we go. There's our frequency distribution with relative frequency or probability. Now, based on past data, we can estimate for every 100 students, about 15.3% will have a B minus. Wow. Less than 0.5%, or if we formatted that as a fractional percent, it looks like only about 0.4% get an A+. Now, this is on a math class past grade data set. Let's go look at an English data set. Here's the data set. Control down arrow. It looks like about 1,250. Control up arrow. But here we go. We have all possible grades, so we can use the COUNTIFS functions to count. So I'm going to use COUNTIFS, criteria, range. Click in the top cell, Control-Shift down arrow, F4. There's the range. All the items we want to potentially count, comma, criteria 1. It doesn't say range, so left arrow. That's what I want COUNTIFS to count, A pluses. It's a relative cell reference, so close parentheses. Control Enter. Copy it down. If I go to the last cell in F2, there it is. The orange one's relative. It's now counting how many Fs it found. When I hit Enter, 47. Alt equals, because we want to add them all up. This is the whole or the total, the denominator of our rate calculation. We calculate the rate by equals the part divided by the base or whole or total. Be sure to hit that F4. Control Enter. Copy down. I'm going to come down here. Alt equals, better equal 100 if we were careful about how we set this all up. And sure enough, it does. Wow, so for this particular last 5 years for English, it wasn't 0.4% like our math class. 2.7% got A+. Wow, 11, about 11, about 14, about 10 got A to B+. All right, let's go look at another example. This is a business example. Here's a restaurant. Isaac's Italian Restaurant has 4 banquet rooms. Over the past year, they collected the below data. You know, they just went to their register and said, for this night, how many of the banquet rooms were used? Well, on January 3rd, 2014, 1. On January 4th, we used 2. Oh, look at this. The next Friday, we used all 4. Now, imagine us wanting to count and then calculate some percentage or probability. We could then estimate how many rooms are going to be used on any given night. So let's first count either 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. That means how many rooms are used. Do we use 0 or all the way up to 4? So COUNTIFS comes to our rescue. Equals COUNTIFS. Criteria range. I click in the top cell for number of rooms used. Control-Shift down arrow. It looks like these are the records for the banquet room over the last 100 days. Now I need to lock this. So F4, comma, criteria 1, there's the 0. So for this cell, COUNTIFS will count how many zeros. Close parentheses, Control Enter. Wow, so only 2 nights did we not use any of the banquet rooms. Oh, only 8 did we use all 4. Now that's useful information. If we're thinking about how many people to have on hand as employees, the fact that very few times do we have 4 rooms used, that's useful information. Or maybe we get rid of that 4th room because we hardly ever use it. Now let's calculate the total. Alt equals and enter. Now we can calculate our probability using our part divided by base. Hey, there's the part as a relative cell reference divided by, there's the 100. Be sure to lock that with the F4. Control Enter, copy it down. Come down to the bottom, F2. Relative is blue, absolute or locked is orange. Looking good. Enter. Alt equals and enter. So it looks like if we're the business, it's useful to know that 42% of the time, 2 rooms are used. About 27 or 21% of the time, we have 1 or 3. And a very small percentage is 4 or 0. Now let's look at one last example. Let's go over to the sheet target. Now this data set is big. This is data from the last 9,979 customers. So we have a transaction number. An amount, we don't really care about that. What we care about is this column right here. These are the items purchased. Over here, we have a unique list of each one of the categories that the store uses to describe what this item was. This was a food item. This was other, whatever that is. And this was a toy. So we can count from this past transaction data set how many of the transactions were home, other, electronics, and so on, and then calculate our relative frequency. Equals COUNTIFS, the criteria range. We're only interested in this column. Control Shift down. Oh, wow, that's a lot. That's like 60,000 records. F4 because we need to lock it and jump the screen back in view. Notice that's about 60,000. Think about how fast we're doing this. Highlighting the whole column with a fast keyboard, using COUNTIFs. This is just amazing. Now I'm going to do a comma. Criteria 1, that's home. So now COUNTIFs will go through and count how many homes are in that column. Close parentheses, Control Enter, copy it down. And then Alt equals at the bottom and enter. 59,997. That's how many items, right? This was the number of customers because a customer might have bought multiple different items on a given transaction number. Now we can calculate the probability that a particular item purchased was for one of these categories. Equal sign, there's the part as a relative cell reference divided by there's the total. F4 to lock it. Control Enter. Copy it down. Come to the bottom. It better equal 1. Alt equals and enter. So the probability that a given item purchased across the register was electronics, about 20%. Toys, not so much, about 4 4/10%. So it looks like for food, about 15% of the items purchased are food items at this particular store from this data set. All right, now there are a few homework problems. There's 2 homework problems that are similar. There's a data set, and you're going to have to use COUNTIFs and then calculate relative frequency probability using the part base formula. So we saw how to use our part base formula to calculate a frequency distribution and calculate probabilities we can use to estimate the unknown future. We did it on a sales transaction data set. We did it on a restaurant data set. And over on English 101 and Math 148 sheets, we had data sets, and we calculate the probability for getting a particular grade. We also talked about the importance and power of the COUNTIFS function. And we started it all off talking about probability. Remember, probability is an estimate of an event that may occur in the future. And remember, probability is always between 0 and 1. All right, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come, including next few videos. We'll have 2 more short videos about how to use percentages. All right, we'll see you next video.